Hello out there, and today we are going to be taking a look at the ZT0707, a new for 2020 zero tolerance knife that I was really excited to get my hands on when this was announced, because this is sort of a distant cousin, I'd say, to like the Natrix line that has the bare knuckle in it. There's a little bit of design resemblance there, and when I first saw this knife, I knew that it was one that I could potentially really like. And I thought that to the extent that I even have delayed putting out my top 10 knives of the year video until I was able to really figure out how I felt about this one, until I was able to get this one in hand. And spoiler alert, this isn't going to be on the list. It's not a bad knife though, and I think there's a lot of people who are going to really like it, although there are just a few things about it that just make me believe that, you know, when I have the $250 to shell out on a knife, it's not going to be this one. So we'll get back to all that. We're going to get into all the details and the specs and all the things that you need to know if you don't already know about this knife. One thing I want to start with, though, is the boxing. So the boxing is different, and this is the first ZT that I've gotten for a long time. And again, this is not my knife. This is actually coming from the Apex Passaround group. It was donated by the people at River's Edge Cutlery to the Passaround. So first of all, shout out to those guys. Very kind of them to donate the knife to the Passaround group. And they also did a lot of donating and stuff to the Nick Maffei charity auctions and raffles that I did. So if you're looking for good people to buy knives from, I would highly recommend them. They seem like really stand-up people and good people to deal with. So that's where it came from. The box, though, getting back to that, it does no longer say proudly overbuilt. It says experience it. So to anyone who is asking the question, is the old ZT ever coming back? No, I don't think so. If you mean those big overbuilt, like massive folders that ZT was sort of known for at the beginning of their time, no, that's just not happening. Occasionally there might be a new model that resembles something from the past and might have a really stout kind of build, but a lot of the stuff now is just a higher end version of Kershaw kind of stuff, which is what I see this knife being. Really similar to like the slip joint that they put out. So yeah, ZT has evolved, they've changed. A lot of people are going to say it might be for the worse, but I don't know. It could be for the better if you're just into pocket knives and you're not looking for tanks. So anyway, now that that's aside, let's take a look at the size of this knife, some of the specs, and some comparisons here. So the overall size, it's pretty darn long. We've got a blade that's 3.6 inches long, which is pretty much at the top of what my range would be, possibly beyond the range, because most knives that are 3.6 inches long and in cutting edge, you know, they're going to be pretty darn long overall too, and probably pretty heavy. The difference with this knife is that it just isn't heavy because of how sleek it is. And you can see, I'm trying to get it lined up nicely. You can see it's really similar in overall length to the PM2. A lot more cutting edge though. So what this knife has, and another good Spyderco to compare it to, is the Siren. Which the Siren is a little bit longer overall, but the same kind of, or the same length of cutting edge. So we have that. What else can we bring out? Here is the ZT0770CF, which is something of a distant cousin to this knife. Benchmade Mini Presidio 2. You know, so what we have is just a knife that is pretty darn sleek, and you're going to see right now it is pretty darn light too, 2.4 ounces for a 3.6 inch cutting edge. And so what that really did, and I felt this immediately when I unboxed it, is it felt like a feather. And 2.4 ounces isn't the lightest knife that you're going to find, but comparatively with how much longer it is than, say, a bug out, I think the density of this knife is even less than that. So it just literally felt like nothing when I first got it in hand. And you can see we have this carbon fiber scale, no liner here, and then we have the titanium with some cutouts, and it's not even all that thick. So, I mean, there's just not a lot here to provide weight. And it just caused me to think that the knife was a little bit on the flimsy side. If we're going to be like really straight up and honest, that's sort of how I felt at first. And then when I finally got to using the knife and carrying it, I got used to it, and I saw how it performed, and it was just fine. So, you know, that kind of reservation went away. But, you know, for someone who's used to carrying something with a little bit more density, it was a little jarring at first, and it was a bit of a turnoff, to be honest. So just be aware of that. If you get the knife in hand and you feel that way, you probably will get over it relatively quick. Now, let's get into some of the material. So here, this cutting edge in this blade, 3.6 inches, a really nice amount of belly. I really, really enjoy the blade shape here. And if we bring back the 0770CF, again, the number designation is very close on these. You can see, you know, there's maybe a little bit of resemblance here with the blade, the amount of belly, but, you know, there's a different curvature on the spine that you're not going to have on the 0707. The only other knife from this line that I have currently is the copper natrix, and you can see the copper natrix is going to very much resemble the 0770 up here with that blade shape. If there's any knife in the line that resembles this one, it's the bare knuckle, because the bare knuckle is essentially, you know, this design elongated. And so what we have is sort of a riff on that is how I see it. So the blade here, 20 CV though, which is a pretty nice thing. I love my 20 CV. I've never really had an issue with it. That said, you know, the knives that I the knives that I have that I'm using all the time, I don't need 20 CV for the daily tasks that I have. So yeah, it does just fine. I don't have any complaints when it comes to that. The look of the blade is top notch, nice little stone wash. Not too much when it comes to all of your blade stamping and billboarding. You've got the model number, you've got the Kershaw, like Kershaw House Design logo up here, USA, steel type, ZT, and that's really about it. So it looks pretty good. As we start to move on back, you can see the knife from above, relatively thin, a little bit of a flaring down there near the booty. The jimping here is good, but it's sort of a near miss. And a lot of the expectations for this knife and a lot of the things that I think this knife misses on are not things that I would necessarily call out if the knife were $200 cheaper or even $100 cheaper. But at this price point, for this level of investment, my opinion is that, you know, you should sort of get the best. And what I'd be looking for with the jimping is just it extended a little further and have it be all usable. You know, it's pretty good stuff, except, you know, right here, it's just not really that good. It doesn't extend high enough for you to really get a good grip on. It's just preferential stuff. But again, it's stuff that at that price point would matter to me. It could have been done a little bit better and a little bit more of a thorough job, I guess. Now, as we continue to move on back, we've got a frame that is pretty darn visually attractive. I really like the shaping and the contouring on both sides. Let's start with the carbon fiber side. So the CF here it has a couple issues, but the general idea is very nice. The machining here on the edges, chamfering, like all of it, it just looks good. It feels good. It has a little bit of a gloss here, but it still is not at all slick. So, you know, you do feel a little bit of traction to give you some grip and some points of contact. I like the idea of these grooves. The problem is, and when you get up close, maybe you'll be able to see it here, the real problem with these grooves is that it exposes just some issues with the carbon fiber. And I don't know if that's finishing or if that's just the quality of the carbon fiber itself. But yeah, you can see it just looks wonky. It's potentially like voids in the carbon fiber where it's just not the best piece. Yeah, and it's certainly disappointing to see that on a knife of this price point. So yeah, if you are not really catching that right now, I'll insert some pictures, but it just doesn't look great. And again, it's something that I'm not the most nitpicky person in the world, and I still would very much like this carbon fiber scale, but my expectation for the amount of money that you're paying for this knife is better consistency and better QC with that consistency. So there's that. Over here on the lock side, we have a really, really pretty piece of titanium. I love the machining that was done. It's nothing deep, so you don't really feel it all that much, although, you know, you can dig your finger in, but You know, it just is a good visual texture as well. And then the stone wash on this is pretty darn nice. Let me try to get this focused, because you might be able to see, you might be able to pick them out, but there are some scratches in this titanium that blend in beautifully. This is a knife from the passaround that's been going around the country for the better part of the year. I'm one of the last people to get it. So this knife has been carried, this knife has been used, this knife has not been, you know, I don't think that people have been necessarily holding back or trying to beat it up, but it's just something that happens over time. Is just wear happens, and I can't really pick out, even though there are some scratches, you can't really pick them out. They blend in really well. You can see as we move all the way to the back, just that wear with the clip. This is sort of just a painted clip. Maybe would like to see something different in terms of the finish on the clip. That is starting to wear, so there's that. I believe this clip is reversible though, which is pretty darn cool, just the way you'd have to take apart the knife completely in order to do it. But yeah, from what I saw on the inside, just like looking through, you should be able to flip this. Correct me if I'm wrong there if you've tried and it doesn't work, but open frame, so that's definitely a plus. Fit and finish, centering, very good. So front to back, that is the knife. There are a few other characteristics and things that I definitely want to talk about. Let's just talk about performance first. And like I said, this was a knife that that was sent around to a number of people, and they had it, used it. I don't know if it was touched up or sharpened or anything like that. I did not sharpen it when I first got the knife. I just tried it out with some paper and it cut just fine, but it was not as sharp as from factory. And from there, I just used it. And honestly, that's sort of, for me, a realistic kind of testing base, because for the most part, you know, I don't try to keep every single knife that I have super razor sharp all the time. Sometimes I'll use it and just put it down and then come back to it and use it again. And so, you know, having a knife that isn't factory sharp when you start a test seems to be a pretty good way of doing it for me to get an indication of how it's going to perform just day in and day out. And so that's what you're looking at right now. And it went pretty darn well when it comes to cutting with it, and I was surprised. Again, my reservation out of box was that it was just light and flimsy, but the knife ergonomically feels pretty darn good. You know, you're able to get it in hand, and it just cuts nicely. It's a nice knife to cut with, surprisingly. Is it going to be something that you're going to be whacking on stuff with? No, it's not a ZT of old, so, you know, we have to get past that. But is this going to be good for all of your small EDC tasks, and then maybe more so in a pinch? Absolutely. Yeah, if I had to break down boxes for an hour with this knife, it'd be just fine. So, again, if I knew I was going to have to break down boxes for an hour, I'd choose a different knife, but this knife is more than sufficient. Now let's get into a couple of the other qualities that are special about this knife in terms of the lock and the action and, yeah, this tuned detent system. So the lockup, again, which would have been something that was a reservation just with how light the knife was, you know, I was concerned, is it going to be really good? And I love the way this just engages. I mean, this interface is solid. It doesn't have a long way to move, but it just gets right in there. It looks good. It feels good. You can see that engagement is really nice. So great job with that. And then the action is interesting. So, whoa, the action is interesting. Thanks for coming along on a ride. So there's something new on this knife, and it's called the tuned detent system. And what this is a way to keep you from failing in opening the knife. Because what you have is a detent that is on the opposing side. You're on the show side instead of the lock side. And what that does is it gives you the ability to open the knife even if you're pressing down on the lock bar. So pushing down the lock bar, still able to open the knife, which can be an issue. That said, has that been an issue with any ZTs for me? No. It has not. I've never experienced that. It has been on some Kershaws, and there are a lot of people who had this bare knuckle, or excuse me, they had this copper matrix, and then also the bare knuckle, who just said the detents were super, super stiff, and they weren't able to open them. I don't know that that was an issue with the liner or the frame being pushed. I just know it was an issue that people were not able to open their knives very well. Was this a response to that? I don't know. I don't know exactly what it was. It is an innovation, and it does work, You can put pressure down on the lock bar and still engage the knife, which is nice. Again, the necessary aspect of it, I don't know. What it does, though, is it provides you with additional friction when you're trying to close the knife, because there are still 2 detent balls, and I'll try to insert pictures if I can get in there. I'm not going to disassemble this knife, but what ends up happening is you have the detent, which is attached to the carbon fiber scale via like a little inlay frame in there, and so that's where the detent ball is actually like locking in. There's also, though, a detent ball on the frame over here, which keeps the blade from just rubbing against the titanium, so it sort of is a separator. So you still have that, but what I'm getting at is, and correct me if I'm not explaining this quite the right way, but what that means is you have additional friction when you're trying to close the knife, and you have an additional detent ball to sort of get by. So as much as I've tried, I haven't been able to get this knife to drop shut. Again, I haven't taken it apart. You might be able to take yours apart and fiddle with it, or maybe yours will come from factory, able to drop shut. I don't know. I used some KPL heavy on the 2 detents, and it started dropping shut a little bit better and moving a little bit better, but you know, there's certainly room for improvement there, but it's still a perfectly functional knife in that capacity. Not an issue, but also if you're someone who wants something to be like the most fidget-friendly knife, this might not be it for you. All right, let's take a look at that action for a couple more seconds. And now for 30 seconds of non-stop, unadulterated ZT0707 action. All right. So hopefully that explains it and you get the gist of it. And now talking about the final look and the final thoughts. So this is a $248, $250 knife, guys. For me, that's just too steep, is what I'll say. I like the design. I like the look. The blade being just as long as it is, it sort of is the first thing that's like, maybe not my ideal size overall. And then, you know, just the little opportunities in the machining, the little things that are just jumping out at me. This is a knife that when I get $250 to spend on a knife, it's just not going to be this. You know, and this is one of those things where if you're really into the design and you really like it, you might find value there. And while I can sit here and, you know, only have a few nitpicky things to say about the knife, I just know that if I added this to my collection, it would just end up being part of the collection and wouldn't be part of the rotation. Not for long, at least. So that's my take on it. It's a good knife, not really my favorite knife. I think there are some things that could have been done better. But, yeah, just not my preferred design. So that's it, guys. Any questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, let me know. Let me know your thoughts about ZT. Do you think the new direction with them just making more pocket knife style stuff instead of big tanks, do you think that's a good thing? Let me know your thoughts and what your favorite ZT is, all right? And any other questions, comments, I already said all that. So thanks for watching and take care. Have a good one, guys.